will decide very quickly, within the first few months, whether they want to be a scientist or they want to do a PhD. And I'll explain the difference between the two. Today, to do a PhD is not very difficult. If they really want a PhD, I give them a set of instructions every month. They go away, they do them. We collect them slowly into an organized folder. We continue to do that for 3 years, and at the end of the 3 years, we put all that into a simple manuscript with figures. We put them in folders, and we get a PhD, and that's it. And today, biology has the power to do that without ever thinking very much, as long as you are organized and you can think a little bit. But if you really want to be a scientist, then, well, we can do this also. What we can do is explore something that we don't know and that you want to know. Now, that can be frustrating, and I've seen it in many students, because that means that you're going to face the unknown, you're going to face things that don't work, you're going to face a lot of work, and that's really the test of a scientist. The second thing that I always tell them in addition is that a PhD is about them, and that in a PhD what you're going to do is learn about yourself. You're going to learn a great deal. You're going to learn if you really like science, you're going to learn how resilient you are, you're going to learn how disciplined you are, you're going to learn what you are made of. And I see that all the time, that those two things, there is people that can do a science, not many. There's many people that can do a PhD, there is some that can do none. And there is also, you can see all the time, and I think if you fail to understand that a PhD, that you are learning about yourself, you will have thrown away your PhD.
I want them to own the question they're addressing. It's difficult because you can get handed a project by me, but then if it's not your project and you're working for me, it's not the same thing, because the graduate student's got to put his or her life into this, right? For far too short a time, they have got way too much work to do, so they've got to love it and they've got to be passionate about it. So I always tell students that I'm not going to hand them a project, we're going to sit down and discuss one, and we'll come up with one together. And I hope that student will then think, this is my project, I really want to know the answer to this, because that's the only way to get through it.
Now, most graduate students, for part of my saying so, always start with the wrong question, because they start with a much too big a question, okay? And you say, yeah, fine, but design me an experiment to answer that question, and they can't. So, okay, you've got to refine it down to a question which you can answer, yeah? Okay, you've got 4 groups of animals, whatever it is, design an experiment to answer that question. But before you ask the question, before you design the experiment, you ask the question.
We always say, let's remember what the big picture is, because it's very easy to start following, get off track and start following little things. Okay, A leads to B, leads to C, leads to D, and you think, wait a minute, am I actually answering the question I set out to address? So I always tell them, okay, what does this matter? How is this getting us closer to the end? And that can help people stay focused.
Try to think out of the box. Try not to look at what just happens to be the moment's fashion, because by the time you've got your PhD in, say, 4 years' time, in the UK you get it much quicker than you get in the States, but still, by the time you've got that independence, you get after that. The thing you've chosen because it's so fashionable now may well be overloaded. Too many people climbing on the bandwagon.
Being wedded to one particular idea can often, and you can end up being stuck. Going down it's very difficult getting a good idea. I don't think I've had any really good ideas in my whole career. I've had some reasonably good ones. But if you get even a reasonably good idea, often you can be so bowled over by it and so pleased with yourself, you can end up ignoring evidence that doesn't quite fit, and you can keep plugging away at something which is actually a little bit hopeless.
If scientists get a fact wrong, that's very bad. I mean, if you make a mistake in your experiments, or you make a mistake in your technology, that's held against you. If you get a theory wrong, it's not. People realise that most theories are incomplete or wrong, but by being wrong, they add to understanding, you see what I mean. And he talks about the things that Darwin got wrong. Darwin, for example, believed in blending inheritance, that is everything about which was wrong, of course. And Einstein, didn't believe in dark matter. Of course, 98% of the world is dark matter, and so on. And what else? The Big Bang Theory and Fred Hoyle, all that stuff. He's pointing out all great scientists, even they're great, make big mistakes. The point is 2 things. First of all, they get one right too, which is what matters, and everybody people don't mind about big mistakes. And secondly, if they're great scientists, they admit their big mistakes. And he actually gives a example of it in his own research, where he confidently predicted something called the W boson didn't exist. Then two friends of his discovered it. And he said, right, well, yeah, well done.
Perfectionism is one that's a bit of a problem. Some people are real perfectionists and they kind of never quite finish anything off because they're never happy with it. And it's very hard to judge when it's your first paper. You know, when is the point at which to draw the line? When do you have to say, right, this is ready to go out the door? So that's hard. I think you just have to talk to people and listen to others. So that's just being too perfectionist is one problem.
I think the other thing you should do is talk to lots of people and go to lots of seminars, even seminars which seem to peripheral to what you might be interested in, because it's stuff at the interface which is often where all the new action is, opening up new fields of study.
I think this curiosity is a very important thing, and try not to kill it. I think this is what I see often, that in the process of graduate school, sometimes some people do lose that curiosity because we are making it very difficult.
Let me tell you, it's a lot of luck in this. You know, it's like being an actor or being a writer or being anything else. You know, okay, you need a certain amount of talent, whatever you want to call it, or ability. You need a lot of luck too. I was lucky; I got in the right labs and the right people, which I hope will do, and it happened well.
What advice, as I say, be true to yourself. Try to pursue, never forget, I've seen many people being transformed because they change from wanting to pursue knowledge to wanting to pursue fame. Never do a Faustian pact, because as I say, that will not get you very far. Don't sacrifice your will to know for your will to succeed. I think that's the very important.
You should start on a project which is fairly pedestrian and observational, that really looks at something, describes it, or some experiments that will get you into the material. And then as you're doing that, questions will come in your mind, hopefully, that will be new. And then you have to weigh up which of them, if any, are worth following. And you can do that on the side while you're doing your bread and butter project, because at least there'll be something.
I think in a PhD, it would be a bit risky to not fluff wide, because you need to get your PhD, and as I've just mentioned, you're still at an early stage. You've got to learn how to do experiments, how to write up data, and so on. So it's not good to be too risky at that stage. But when you get to the postdoctoral level, I think it's quite a good idea to start to think carefully about the project.
And in my opinion, many students, particularly graduate students, thinking about their postdoc, don't spend enough time thinking about the subject and looking at themselves and asking what they were personally suited for and what do they like to do.
Well, I read somebody once wrote that, you know, when you come up with good ideas that have nothing to do with your current project, but you still feel they're good ideas, keep a record of them and so on, and then think early on about what you'd really love to do next and where you'd love to do it, and approach people very early for a postdoc, because somebody who's that committed and doesn't say I'm getting my PhD next week and I desperately need a place to move to. Somebody who says it's going to be at least another year, but I'm thinking about postdocs already and I'm really interested in your work.
One thing that is not to underestimate is that you will need your PhD mentor for years after you graduated. You will need a lot of recommendation letters for every fellowship you apply, for every studentship, for every position you apply. You will need a letter of recommendation from your graduate advisor, and so it's much better if you get along with your supervisor well, and if he's really supporting you.